Welcome back to Farmer Stephanie's Garden of Eden. I'm Farmer Stephanie, and I'm here to share with you what I know, sow, and grow in my garden. This is technically my April video, but I have a confession to make. I'm actually filming this at the beginning of May because it has been so rainy here in Michigan that I've not gotten a chance to get outside and do some filming of my work on my garden. Additionally, because it's been so rainy, I haven't really been able to get out and do much. But we have a nice weekend here. It's a cooler day here in early May, but it's been a good day to get out and get some of the early prep work when it comes to laying out my garden and where I'm going to plant things. So I'm going to show you a little bit of what I've been doing as far as planning out the spacing of my garden, as well as catch you up on all the things I did this April. Let's go check out the garden. As we get into late April and early May here in Michigan, I'm about 2 or 3 weeks away from putting plants in the ground. However, because that time is coming up quick, I want to have a plan of where I'm going to put everything when it is time to plant them in the ground. The way I like to think about where I'm going to plant things and how I'm going to space things out is to start putting my tomato cages and my trellises and different types of support medium in the ground where I think I might want to plant my plants. This gives me a nice visual representation of where I'm going to plant everything. Because I've started my seeds inside, I know exactly how many of each of the different types of plants I have and which types of plants I have. A few seedlings have unfortunately died off and they didn't make it, but I have a strong supply of plants to fill up my gardening space. There's a few other reasons why I like to put my cages and trellises in the ground before I plant my plants. As I mentioned, I do like that visual representation so that when I'm ready to plant, I just have to go down the row and plant everything where the cage is. Also, I don't have to worry about damaging the roots of the seedlings, putting the cage in after I've planted the plants. Another reason that I like to put the cages in first is because I am dealing with a lot of roots in this area. I have roots of this lilac bush behind me in this general vicinity. I have roots of a big tree over here in the corner. And so if I put the cage in and I hit a root, I have the freedom to move that cage just a little bit without worrying about the cage still being centered around the plant. If the cage goes in first, I can put the plant in after and not disrupt my seedling at all, and I know exactly where I'm going to put that seedling. So we have here this green square. This is one of my tomato cages. It's a little bit taller than the traditional round cages you may be familiar with. I find the short round cages are not sturdy enough for my tomato plants. So what I do is I have these taller square cages, and I have a big metal stake here that I'm going to pound into the ground. I'm going to anchor this stake about 1 foot to 1.5 feet in the ground. And I will tie the stems of my tomato plants to these stakes, and then these taller, sturdier square cages will support the branches and the fruit as they produce. These smaller cages I do find useful though. I use these smaller cages for things like my eggplant, peppers, even some herb plants that tend to get tall and brambly and top heavy. I support with these smaller round cages that are relatively inexpensive. I also have some trellises that I've put up that I will grow cucumbers and melons on, and so I'm going to play around over the next week or so with where I want all of these cages, where I want all of my stakes and my trellises. And then when we get into about the 3rd week of May, 4th week of May, I'll be able to start going down the row and planting all my plants. Because I haven't had time to get out and really work the ground at all, I also have to weed the dirt. I have plants popping up from seeds that fell from my garden last year, and so I'm going to dig some of those plants up and give them away to friends or maybe move them to a different location in the garden. And then hopefully when we get into the later parts of May, it'll be time to start planting the garden officially in the ground. And that's when the plants will really start to take off. So let's check out though what else I've been up to in the month of April. Even though it's too cold at night for these plants to survive outside, it is time to start getting these plants used to being outside by acclimating them to true sunlight. Plants that have started indoors under artificial light are not accustomed to the strong UV rays of true sunlight. And if I were to take these plants from indoors under the artificial light and immediately put them in the ground outside where they're exposed to the sun all day long, they'll actually get sunburned and the leaves will shrivel up and die. And so it's important to get these plants used to being in the sun. I usually start this process in about mid-April, and I'll put the plants outside maybe on a cloudy day for about half an hour, and then maybe on a cloudy day for about an hour, and then maybe 2 hours, and then maybe a full sun for 15 minutes. And I gradually just start increasing the amount of sunlight that these plants are exposed to, so that by the time they're ready to go in the ground in late May, they're used to being out in the sun all day long, and they can survive in the sun all day long. Most of these are plants that I've started indoors, and they're to the point where they can tolerate the sun, full sun maybe for about 2 or 3 hours. On a cloudy day they could be outside pretty much all day. I still have quite a few plants inside that I haven't started that process with yet, but I'll be starting that process very soon for all of my plants, so that hopefully again by about the 3rd or 4th week of May everything's ready to stay outside permanently and go in the ground. Back in March, one of the most important things I was doing was checking out my perennial fruit plants to see what had survived the winter. I was especially concerned with one of my blackberry plants, one of my grape plants, and one of my currant plants. Back here I'm looking at the blackberries. One blackberry plant unfortunately did not make it through the winter. I have seen no growth on it so far. However, my second blackberry plant is doing really well. A lot of this is actually just weeds. This is my blackberry plant. It fell over, but it survived. And so what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to weed out all of these weeds, and I'm going to come and I'm going to put soil on top of the stem so that each of these shoots that's growing upwards will mimic a full plant and grow up like a full plant, and that will spread and fill in the area just a little bit more nicely. So that's another project I'm going to be up to here in May, is cleaning out these weeds and bring in some soil and some compost and fixing up this patch. Over here we have the 2 grape plants. The further one on the right was the first plant I noticed signs of life on. However, over the past few weeks I have seen no progression, and the bud itself actually fell off. So I'm a little concerned that that plant isn't going to make it after all. The second one on the left, however, does have some good leaf forms starting, and I think this one will make it no problem at all. And that actually might be okay, because the one plant in the center of the fence will be a little bit more symmetrical than having 2 skewed off to the right. And the amount of spacing on this fence that I have is probably sufficient for one plant. This is my patio peach tree. It has that purple foliage I was talking about back in March, and it does have some little teeny tiny peaches started on it. So we'll see if I can beat the squirrels to the peaches this year. I doubt it, but I'm gonna try. And of course, I've been checking on my currant cuttings every day. Unfortunately, this 6th one that we weren't sure about really didn't make it. So I only have 5 cuttings, but they are leafing out very nicely. They're getting pretty tall, and a couple even flowered and have some little tiny fruits on them. Won't really get a harvest this year. There's not enough fruit to be worth even picking. And if I'd had more flowers, I probably would have picked them off anyways to encourage the plants to make more roots instead of fruit. But the last thing that we've been up to here in April is building the garden space where these currants will eventually go. Let's go check that out. Up here in front we have the biggest project of the spring, putting in a brick perimeter to the front garden just like we have in the back. Just a few weeks ago this was all grass and just a little bit of red mulch, and now we've extended this garden out a few feet from the front and we've gotten about half of the brick edging in. Eventually this will extend all the way down along the side of the house to that fence in back that divides the front and the backyard. It's been pretty rainy, and so that project has stalled out a little bit, but hopefully as it starts to dry up in these next few weeks, we'll get a little bit more of that brick wall put in. And then over here along this side of the house is where I'm going to plant some asparagus that a friend gave me, my currant cuttings, and some strawberry plants that I purchased online. And so hopefully when we come back in May, that will be starting to be filled in as well. Up front, I have a few edible plants here and a few ornamental plants. I'll be planting these big planters on the porch in the next few weeks. And to the left of those, in the black planters, I have chives. And the chives are just starting to bloom. The blooms look like these big, fluffy, purple pom-poms. And a fun fact of the day, the blossoms of the chives are edible too. And so I think I know exactly what I'm going to be making with those once I have enough of them to incorporate into a recipe. And that's a quick recap of what I was up to in the month of April. Here we have the blueberry plants that I showed you in March. They're starting to flower. I think blueberry flowers are one of the prettiest flowers in my vegetable garden or fruit garden. They have nice, small, dainty white flowers, and I'm looking forward to seeing the nice, small blueberries form shortly behind. I have 3 blueberry plants, one of which had never flowered before. I thought I was going to have to give up on it, but this spring it has produced flowers. And so that's a big relief to me. I thought I was going to have to give up on that plant, but it is going to produce after all. So come back in May and we'll check out how the blueberries are doing. You can see over here the beginnings of my colored pots for my mint. I'm going to be working on getting those filled up with potting soil and planting my mint outside. And I'm going to be, of course, filling in all my tomato cages and trellises and empty spaces in the garden with all of my plants that I've grown inside. Make sure to like and subscribe so that you don't miss that video, and we'll see you back in later May. Thanks for joining.